Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The truck's headlights didn't kill me. The text message glowing on my shattered phone screen did. I'm sorry, Julian. It's always been Elian. It was always him. Blood filled my mouth, metallic and hot, indistinguishable from the bitter taste of a life spent in the shadows. I lay broken on the wet asphalt, the rain mingling with the red pooling beneath me, while the world spun into a kaleidoscope of agony. I was a beta. Ordinary. Forgettable. The background noise to my twin brother's symphony. Elian was an omega, rare, precious, smelling of sweet lilacs and social currency. I was just Julian. And the man I had devoted 5 years to, the alpha named Cassian Thorne, had finally admitted the truth I had carved out of my own heart to ignore. I was just the placeholder. The seat warmer. The mirror image without the soul. As the sirens wailed in the distance, a sound like a morning choir, I closed my eyes. I didn't pray for heaven. I prayed for oblivion. But the universe, in its cruel sense of humor, had other plans. Gasps of air tore through my lungs, sharp and freezing. I sat up, clutching my chest, waiting for the agony of crushed ribs and punctured organs. Instead, I felt the soft, high thread count cotton of my university dormitory sheets. My hands shook as I held them up to the morning light filtering through the blinds. No scars. No blood. No wedding ring on my finger. I grabbed the phone on the nightstand. The date glared back at me. 7 years ago. I was 21 again. I was alive. And today? Today was the day Cassian Thorne would walk into the library, knock my books over, and start the tragic rom-com that would end with my corpse on a highway. A laugh bubbled up in my throat, sounding jagged and hysterical. I wasn't just a beta anymore. I was a ghost who knew the script, and I was going to burn the theater down. I dressed with meticulous care. In my past life, I wore beige, gray, and soft blues, colors designed to blend in, to be the soothing balm to Cassian's fiery temper. I opened the closet and shoved those clothes aside. I found a black turtleneck and fitted charcoal trousers, sharp and severe. I slicked my hair back, exposing the forehead and eyes I used to hide behind messy bangs to avoid outshining Elian. Julian. The voice was like a chime of silver bells. Elian burst into the room, his omega pheromones already potent, smelling of fresh spring flowers. He was beautiful. Truly, objectively beautiful. And in his eyes, there was no malice, only the suffocating innocence of someone who has never been told no. You're going to be late for the lecture. And you know the heir to the Thorne conglomerate is visiting today. Elian chirped, adjusting his silk scarf. I know, I said, my voice dropping an octave lower than he was used to. Let him visit. I have work to do. Elian blinked, his doe eyes widening. But, you always want to see the alphas. Not anymore, Elian. I'm tired of watching wolves feed. I brushed past him, my shoulder checking his slightly. It was a petty rebellion, but it felt electric. The university library was a cathedral of silence and dust, the perfect hunting ground for the elite. I set up my workspace in the back corner, burying myself in architectural schematics. I was a beta, which meant I had no heat cycles, no rut-induced madness. I had only my mind, and in my last life, I had sacrificed my career to be Cassian's domestic accessory. Not this time. The air pressure in the room shifted. A heavy, dominating scent of cedarwood and burnt ozone rolled over the rows of books. Alphas used their pheromones like gravity, forcing everyone to orbit them. Footsteps approached. Heavy. Deliberate. You're in my seat. I didn't look up. I knew that voice. It was the voice that whispered promises in the dark and apologies in the light. Cassian Thorne. There are 500 seats in this library, Mr. Thorne, I said, flipping a page of my blueprint. Pick another one. Silence. Thick, shocked silence. In my past life, I would have scrambled up, apologized, gathered my things, and blushed furiously when our hands brushed. You know who I am? Cassian asked, his voice dripping with the arrogance of a man who owned the skyline. I finally looked up. Cassian was younger than the man who watched me die, but the sharp jawline and predatory midnight blue eyes were the same. He loomed over the table, flanked by 2 other sycophantic alphas. He expected submission. He expected a beta to fold. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. I looked him dead in the eye, a challenge no beta ever offered an alpha of his rank. I know you, I said coldly. You're the man blocking my light. Move. Cashin's eyes narrowed. His pupils dilated, the beast within him sensing a threat rather than prey. You look like Elian, but you don't smell like him. I'm Julian, the twin who doesn't need a heat suppressant to function. Now, if you're not here to study structural engineering, go away. I returned to my work. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, but my hands remained steady. For a long moment, Cashin didn't move. The air crackled. Then, I heard a scoff. Interesting, he muttered. He didn't leave. He pulled out the chair directly opposite me, sat down, and stared. He didn't open a book. He just watched me, like a biologist studying a new, venomous species of insect. Weeks turned into months. The script had changed, but the cast remained. In the original timeline, Cashin courted me to get close to Elian. My family, the prestigious but fading Vales, wouldn't let an alpha near their precious Omega heir without vetting. I was the test drive. I knew this now. I was the safe entry point. But in this timeline, I gave him nothing. I focused on my internship at a rival firm. I graduated top of my class. I ignored his calls, burned his flowers, and deleted his messages. And the colder I got, the hotter he burned. Why do you hate me? Cashin cornered me one evening outside the architecture building. Rain poured down, soaking his expensive trench coat. I don't hate you, Cashin. I lied, unlocking my car. I just don't care about you. There's a difference. He slammed his hand against the car window, blocking my entry. The rain plastered his dark hair to his forehead. He looked desperate. Unhinged. Liar, he growled. You look at me like I killed you. I froze. The irony was a knife in my gut. Maybe in a dream. You did, I whispered. Stop looking at Elian, he shouted suddenly, his composure cracking. Everyone thinks I'm here for him. My father, your parents, the media. They all think I'm circling the Omega. Aren't you? I asked, my voice flat. He's the prize. I'm the packaging. Cashin grabbed my lapels, yanking me close. The scent of ozone was overwhelming, not attacking me, but enveloping me. I don't want the prize. I want the one thing in this godforsaken city that doesn't bow down to me. I want the ice, Julian. Not the flower. He crashed his lips onto mine. It wasn't a kiss of love. It was a collision of wars. It was angry, possessive, and terrifyingly hungry. In my past life, his kisses were gentle, distracted, as if he were imagining someone else. This was raw. He was trying to devour me, to find the source of my resistance. I didn't kiss him back. I stood there, limp, until he pulled away, panting, his forehead resting against mine. Tell me to stop, he breathed, his voice trembling. Tell me to go to Elian, and I will. It was the pivot point. The moment history could repeat or fracture. Go to Elian, I said clearly. Cashin flinched as if I'd struck him. He stared at me, searching for a lie in my eyes. Finding none, he stepped back, his expression hardening into a mask of ice. Fine, he spat. Watch me. The engagement party of the century took place 6 months later. Cashin Thorne and Elian Vale. The Alpha Prince and the Omega Jewel. I attended only because my parents threatened to disown me if I didn't. I wore a suit of crushed white velvet. A bold choice, usually reserved for the betrothed, but I didn't care. I stood in the corner of the ballroom, sipping champagne, watching my brother beam at the cameras while Cashin stood beside him, looking like a statue carved from misery. The plot hole of my life, why Cashin dated me if he loved Elian, had finally resolved itself in my mind. He hadn't loved Elian. He had loved the idea of the perfect match, the genetic destiny. He had dated me because I was easy. He married Elian because it was expected. He was a coward. You look like you're attending a funeral, a voice sneered. I turned. It was Cashin. He had left his fiancée's side. Just paying my respects to your freedom, I replied, swirling my drink. I did what you asked, Cashin hissed, stepping into my personal space. The guests were whispering, eyes darting toward the scandal of the groom cornering the beta twin. I went to him. I proposed. Are you happy? Ecstatic. You're a liar, Julian. Cashin's hand drifted to my waist. His grip was bruising. You're trembling. I'm cold. You're burning up. Suddenly, the lights in the ballroom flickered and died. Screams erupted. The heavy sound of glass shattering echoed from the skylight. Assassins. I remembered this. In the first timeline, this attack happened at our wedding. Cashin had shielded Elian, who was a guest, leaving me to take a bullet to the shoulder. It was the beginning of the end. Get down, Cashin roared. But this time, he didn't run toward Elian. Gunfire erupted, flashes of light cutting through the darkness. I dropped to the floor, crawling toward the cover of a marble pillar. Julian. I felt a heavy weight tackle me, covering my body with his own. The scent of ozone and copper filled my nose. Cashin was on top of me, shielding me with his massive frame while chaos reigned around us. Go to Elian. I screamed over the noise of the panic. He's helpless. He's an Omega. He has guards. Cashin snarled into my ear, his arms locking around me like a vice. I don't care about him. If you die, I burn this city to the ground. A bullet ricocheted off the marble inches from our heads. Why? I choked out. I'm just a beta. I can't give you heirs. I can't give you power. Cashin looked down at me in the semi-darkness. Blood trickled from a graze on his temple, dripping onto my white suit. His eyes were wild, stripped of all pretense. You think I care about heirs? He laughed, a jagged, manic sound. I spent a lifetime doing what I was told. I picked the Omega. I followed the rules. And I felt nothing. But you look at me with that hate, that utter indifference, and it makes me feel alive. I don't want a submissive partner, Julian. I want an equal. I want the only person who dared to walk away. The lights surged back on. Security swarmed the room. The attackers had fled. We lay there on the floor, a tangle of white velvet and black silk, blood and champagne. Across the room, Elian was sobbing, surrounded by a ring of bodyguards, untouched but terrified. Cashin didn't look at him. He was checking me for wounds, his hands shaking, his eyes scanning every inch of my body with obsessive terror. You're unhurt, he whispered, collapsing his forehead onto my chest. Thank God. The cameras were flashing. The headlines would be scandalous tomorrow. Alpha heir ignores fiancé to save beta brother. I looked at the top of Cashin's head. The cycle was broken. I wasn't the substitute anymore. I was the obsession. You ruined your engagement, I said softly. Cashin lifted his head. He wiped the blood from his face, his expression resolving into something calm and terrifyingly final. There is no engagement, he said. He stood up and pulled me to my feet. Before the entire elite of the city, before my horrified parents and my weeping twin, Cashin Thorne dropped to one knee. Not to propose, but to submit. He took my hand, pressing his forehead against my knuckles in a gesture of absolute fealty. I am an alpha, he announced, his voice carrying through the silent ballroom. I do not bow. But for him, I will crawl. He looked up at me, his eyes burning with a dark, eternal promise. Teach me how to love you, Julian. Even if it takes 1,000 lifetimes. I looked down at the man who had once watched me die. The power dynamic had flipped. The predator was now the pet. I didn't smile. I didn't pull away. I simply tightened my grip on his hand. Get up, Cashin, I said, my voice cool and commanding. We have a lot of work to do. And that is how the beta tamed the wolf. If you enjoyed seeing Julian take control and rewrite his destiny, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you forgive a man who let you die in another life? Or would you make him suffer forever? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then.